And if we were in class at this time, I'd ask you like why you think, and a question to ponder. We were at war with Japan, Germany, and Italy. What happened to the German Americans and the Italian Americans during this time period, and why do you think it did not happen to the Japanese Americans? Why the same thing didn't happen to them? So that would be something that I would ask you to look at. So Korematsu versus the United States was actually a court case that wanted to determine if this Executive Order 9066, was legal, if it had any precedent. And the Supreme Court said that it does have precedent. You can look back at the Shank case from World War One. The removal of Japanese Americans, as determined by the Supreme Court, was a something that we did because there was a clear and present danger that these people were spies. Ooh. Even though there was no evidence to say so, but the Supreme Court in Korematsu said it was legal. President Clinton actually apologizes. Now, excuse me, President Reagan apologizes to many Japanese Americans who had been interned, and they actually were given reparations in the 1980s and the 1990s. But just remember, CCOT, Korematsu, Shank. If you're thinking about Supreme Court cases that dealt with race, Korematsu, Dred Scott, Plessy versus Ferguson, the court has not always taken the needs of minorities into account when they are making these rulings. And so those are 3 court cases, Korematsu, Dred Scott, Plessy versus Ferguson, that show that the United States have often taken away rights from minority groups during our history. Let's see. Please remember again that we have wartime production. That's one of the ways we become the arsenal of democracy. We also create regular labs that did medicines and stuff. We create these labs, and these labs, a lot of times we only hear about the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb. Oh my God, we created the atomic bomb during World War II, blah, 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 blah. But these labs were also creating new sonar, new radar. You can thank these labs for creating the first GPS computer. So you can thank them for creating Waze, if you think about it, or Google Maps, if you think about it in that way, because they are the first people to create GPS, so that when planes were flying over Japan and Germany, that they had more accurate places to drop their bombs. You can thank them for cell phones, all these things in computer, these advances that IBM and other places were doing. All this stuff started during World War II, and it's going to carry on to the 1950s when the first modern, I won't say modern because they were the size of football fields, but when the first computers were invented. You can also thank them for things like penicillin. Those things will also be developed by scientists in the research and development department. But again, the most famous thing was out in Tennessee when they started creating the atomic weapon, the atomic bomb. You can think of the person that you need to, Leslie Groves was the general over this, and then you're going to have J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was the main scientist for the research and development of the A-bomb, the atomic weapons. And the 2 atomic bombs that were detonated over Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the war were developed by the research and development of department. The first bomb in history was detonated in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And they say if you go there today, where it was blasted, there's still radiation in the air. You can still find radiation in the ground, and you might be able to, some of the sand that was down there in the desert turned to glass because it was so hot. You might be able to still find fragments of that there as well. We pay for the war, just like World War I. We pay for the war through through Liberty bonds, through war bonds. And we make sure that people are staying patriotic and pro-war, just like we did during World War I through the use of propaganda. Um, let's see. President Roosevelt wins again for the election of 1944. I mean, he already carried the country through a Great Depression. He had led us through 3 years of World War II, and we were doing okay. Our first battles, and I'll talk about battles tomorrow. This is just home time stuff, or whenever I get to it. But besides the first few battles with Japan, we were not doing that bad. We were doing okay in Germany. Japan, those first few we were losing, but eventually we will turn the tide there as well. But for African Americans, and again, we're talking about minorities still, and how the war was for different groups in America. We will have minority groups join the war. They will be drafted. They will volunteer. You're going to have African Americans, Native Americans, Japanese Americans. They will join the war effort, but they will be in segregated services still. This is the last war that the Army will be segregated, but they will be in segregated units. The most decorated of the units were actually the all Nisi, so the Japanese units, Japanese American units. They had something to prove. They had to prove that they were loyal citizens of the United States, and they do. They fight. They become interpreters. They help tremendously with the war effort. You're going to have our Native American, especially the Navajo, who are going to join the war effort. Over 25,000 of them will serve in the military, and they will actually become known. Some of them will become known as the code talkers, and